My name is Dr. Heath Thomas. I'm the Dean of the Hobbs College for Theology and Ministry at Oklahoma Baptist University. And with me today at our OBU booth at the Southern Baptist Convention, we have a number of distinguished guests, pastors, guys who are passionate about seeing the gospel impacting their communities, the lost coming to Christ, and the saved being discipled into fully formed followers of Jesus. And so to my immediate left, I have Ronnie Parrott, who's pastoring in Charlotte, North Carolina. Immediately next to him, I have Jed Coppenger. He's pastoring. And then finally, Nate Akin down there on our far left. And Nate's in Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina. So it's great to have these guys on the panel today. And essentially what we're doing today, guys, is we're talking about, especially the younger generation of pastors, learning to pastor well, engaging their communities, reaching the lost, and finding ways to be the church wherever God has placed you. You don't have to be a cookie cutter church. You don't have to be the stereotypical church. You just got to be you, where you are, reaching the lost, discipling the saved. So let's talk a little bit about this together, okay? And Ronnie, if you don't mind, I want to start with you. You've been at your church now for how many years?
Just right at 2.5 years.
And this is you've had some really ups and downs, like any pastor it goes. I want you to talk to us a little bit about what does it mean to pastor well. I mean, you're coming into a church, Charlotte, huge flood of people in that area. What does it take to pastor well in your context?
Yeah, so I appreciate you giving us the opportunity to be here today. In my context, I came into a church that was severely broken and hurt and had been through a very rough season. What it took for me to hop in right where I was at was prayer and care. The two things that I intentionally focused on early on was praying diligently for our church and her future, and then caring well. Part of that was preaching, part of that was leading, but by and large, what I did focus on early on was caring well for the people, the brokenhearted, those who've been hurt by the previous pastor, and just leading them step by step forward in a faithful way. And God has given us great fruit in that endeavor.
And so you've done that at multiple levels, I'm guessing, right? So you definitely did that from the pulpit.
Yes.
So talk to me a little bit about that. And then, Jed, I want you to jump in on this too. What does it mean to lead well and care well from the pulpit?
Yeah, I would say, so early on, casting vision forward to a healthier church, healthier situation, saying, I know you've been broken, but here's where we're going. So my first sermons, my first three, were kind of vision casting forward, which they were so hurt. I just picked out like 8 big themes of the Bible and said, hey, here's what our future is going to look like. And they were so broad that people just loved them, but they were all biblical.
Right.
And I couldn't define clearly where we were going, but I knew if I aimed this way, they would follow. And preaching vision, but then leading well from the pulpit in terms of faithful expositional preaching, lifting high Christ, has just over and over again borne just great fruit.
That's incredible. So, Jed, from your perspective, when you think about caring well and leading well your church from the pulpit, what kinds of things come to mind? What have you seen in your own context, in your own ministries, in your churches?
Yeah, at Redemption City Church in Nashville, most of the people in our context aren't from our context. It's really unusual to meet somebody in our city from our city. And it seems that most of these people, and this probably isn't unique to us, most of our people, they don't want to be wowed. They want to be loved. They want to be cared for. And they want to hear the Word of God connected to their lives. So when I think about preaching, there's a huge component that's so obvious to people that are going through a great university like OBU or a seminary, that you need to know your Bible, right? Because we know that's what they are hungry for. That's what they were created for. So we get that. What we see a lot of times, though, in guys who are starting out in ministry is they can't just be good at reading the Bible. They need to be good at reading people's hearts. Right. And in order for you to preach to the hearts in the room and not maybe a professor that you love back in the classroom, you need to spend time with those people. And if you're going to speak to non-Christians in a way that makes sense to non-Christians, you need to be spending time with non-Christians outside of that room, outside of Sunday, in order to make Sundays really special for them. The same thing with new Christians, the same thing with seasoned Christians. And the more that you're in the lives of people outside of Sunday morning, the more you can bring the Word of God to bear into their lives on Sunday morning.
That's great. And so One of the things that I'm excited about is what Baptist21 is doing and the vision that you guys have for really serving into our churches and our pastors. So Nate, talk to us a little bit about how Baptist21 features into this caring well vision, this vision of serving into the local church and helping pastors do what they do and helping churches be set on mission. How does Baptist21 fit into that?
Yeah, so I would say we have endeavored from the beginning to be a pastor-led group. So there's a lot of obviously great institutions in the Southern Baptist Convention. We're very, very thankful for them. Certainly think that the primary means by which we carry out the mission that we've been given is through the local church. It is the headquarters. We've heard it said before, but it is the headquarters of the Southern Baptist Convention. So we believe that wholeheartedly. And so we want to be a group of pastors who are having conversations that pastors want to have in order to serve them, coach them, have those conversations we want to have in order to encourage them in what they're trying to do. And so it is a place also where we can have conversations that institutions necessarily don't want to have because they have political overtones.
Right.
And so we think we can have, again, the conversations people want to have and have no handcuffs on us in order to do that. And so we think that's one of the main ways we can serve.
That's awesome.
Churches.
Now, when we're talking about churches, one of the things that we know about churches is they're always contextual, right? We have the church at Ephesus is not the same as the church at Corinth. These things we know. Each of you are serving in contexts in churches that are fundamentally different. And each context has different needs, has different challenges, right? So from Nashville to Charlotte to Raleigh-Durham to where we are in Shawnee, Oklahoma, right? The churches are all a little bit different. But one of the things that we like to see is churches leveraging into their communities to make a difference for Christ. What we know is the gospel has legs, doesn't it? It always makes a difference in the community in which the gospel is planted, and the gospel is planted through churches, right? So how can a pastor, maybe who's just starting out, how can new pastors begin thinking about, man, how do we serve well in our community without falling in the ditch one way or falling in the ditch the other? How do we be contextually relevant, communally relevant in our community, while at the same time just being faithful to be a church? And that's not always an easy balance to strike.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's a great question. I think that one of the things that we've tried to do and recommended to others and seen some level of effectiveness with is number one is pray. And this seems obvious, but as Southern Baptists or as Christians, it's a lot easier to talk about prayer than there's more talk of prayer than there is actual prayer, and it's incredibly simple. We've got to battle our pride. We don't ask when we don't think we need His help or when we don't think He can help us. We ask whenever we think He can help us. And we need His help to make a lasting difference in our communities. And so I would say if you're not praying, right, pride doesn't pray. So start there with prayer, asking God to show your particular church in your particular context how to meet needs that adorn the gospel. And then the second thing is remember your why. You're there for the gospel, the spread of the gospel, the proclamation of the gospel, and that you have to keep explicit in your ministry. You don't have to be an amazing, whoever your favorite preacher is, kind of articulator of the gospel, but just an ability to say this is about Jesus and it's about what He does. And then third, get out. Like, get out of your building, get out of your normal places and listen to the people, watch the people. And what we did was took a question to a lot of different places, to people that have been there longer than us. We want to take the posture of someone that learns from them, that supports the good work that they're doing, while looking for unique works where we can make a contribution. And the question we took out there is, hey, what is it you always wish was done, but nobody wants to do? We don't want to focus on the glitz. Let's focus on the gutter. You ask that question for a couple of decades, you can make a big difference.
That's great. Ronnie?
Yeah, just on the same subject, piggybacking off that, it's just that one simple question is what are the needs in our community? What are they? And the needs aren't always obvious needs. Like in our community, we're in kind of upper class area, so it's easy to say that this, but really to figure them out through questions in our churches or whatever it may be, to discern and decide what are the needs, and then how does our church really answer those needs effectively?
And when I planted a church, what we did was try to identify organizations in the local community that were already doing really good things so that we could strategically partner with them. And so I think along with what these guys are saying, we intentionally partnered with, sometimes it was those that had the same beliefs we did.
Right.
Sometimes it was a little bit different, but we trusted in this area we can partner together. So we had to at least apply theological triage to some degree to some of those partnerships, but we were looking for strategic ones.
That's good.
And one of the things that we came across was you start to learn that there's just more than that can be done.
Right.
And then you'll have people within your church that are passionate about certain things. And so one of the things that we've learned from other people is just having categories to think through levels of engagement.
Right.
So this might be something that our church does. This is a part of our ministry. This might be something that our church supports financially and with prayer. In some kind of active, ongoing way. This may be a one-time gift, or it's just hey, praise God, thankful for you. And
you've
no
got that
engagement.
passion, go
but
for it.
having those different stages helps you avoid a lot of the awkward conversations.
And that's a really helpful perspective. So guys, thanks very much for this, because at Oklahoma Baptist University, one of the things that we're passionate about is leveraging, helping our students understand what it means to leverage their lives for the sake of the gospel. And that means if you're a nurse, okay, I'm not just a nurse, I'm actually in an outpost in this hospital or in this clinic or whatever. If I'm a business person, I'm leveraging my life in business. So you're leveraging your existence for the sake of Christ and the gospel. That's one of the things that we really emphasize at OBU. We want our students serving into the life and ministry of the local church wherever they find themselves, in whatever discipline or whatever part of the community. And talk to us about how can pastors, how do I want to say this? How can pastors help their congregation in the sense of unleashing the laity for holistic service for Christ and for the gospel? How do we do that well?
So when we first planted Imago Dei in Raleigh, what we would do every time we voted on a new member, and we would say, we're commissioning you to be a missionary to the city. We eventually stopped using that language. I just want to be very careful. Somebody may disagree, and I'm fine with that. We wanted to stop saying missionary because we felt that to some degree devalued cross-cultural missions.
Yeah,
and so we started saying,
good.
We want to commission you to think like a missionary, where you work, where you live, and where you play. And so I think every single week when we were adding new members to the church, we were saying, no, you're now leaving here intentionally in order to engage people with the gospel. And so that was one way we constantly kept that vision in front of people.
But that's a kind of a mindset change, right? From the passive receptor congregant, I come on a Sunday morning, I receive, I'm fed, I get fat and happy in my seat, as opposed to, look, I'm energized through the breaking of the word, through the Lord's Supper, through baptism, through the fellowship together, so I can be energized just to face one more week out there serving the Lord. That's a mindset change. So pastorally, how do you help your congregations get that new mindset?
Yeah, so I would say it is cultural. Our motto is we gather to glorify, scatter to share. And so the idea obviously is to gather together, to go. The last thing we do is stand up, and we kind of commission out as well. But also, I would say it's incumbent on us to be in the community ourselves in just normal servant type roles. Whether that be with our own kids' sports teams or whatever, where we are engaging and not just sitting in our own offices. So as well,
so that's a practical thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you've got to have it's a discipleship issue, right? I mean, when you look at the Bible, most of the miracles in Acts, almost all of the miracles in Acts happen outside the gathered community, right? And a lot of times we think most of the miracles should happen within, right? Yeah. And so I think as we get more biblical and you teach people the Bible, you see Adam, the most holy, sacred thing he can do is get his hands dirty in a gardening, right? Farming. You see the vocation there. You learn about the general calling and the particular callings, and you just start to disciple your people, and you cast that vision for them. It's amazing to me how many seasoned Christians. We've got some people that are a part of our church. We're the first church they've ever been to. We've got other people that have been in church their whole life, it seems like. But even those seasoned Christians, it's amazing how many of them, when you give them an opportunity, when you challenge them to use their vocation to advance the kingdom outside of, hey, serving the kids or whatever, which is important. Right. How energizing it is, because it provides a meaning there that they've been looking for in their work, in their calling, that their lives matter. not just this Sunday morning gathering.
And so let's say that we're reaching people, reaching those who are far from God, that they're lost, they don't know Jesus. Let's say that that's actually happening in the life and ministry of the church, and we pray it is. But once you start doing that as a pastor, how do you preach in a way that connects to those people that are far from God, that seem to be showing up because your congregation is out there in the streets, in the highways, in the byways? How do you preach in such a way to connect with them, but you're also connecting with the folks who've been in church for a while? I mean, that's always a strain in ministry, isn't it?
Yep.
How do you do that well? How do you do that well? If I'm a young pastor, what kinds of things do I need to know?
I mean, I don't know I know how to do it poorly. But I tell you, it starts with, again, the same kind of thing. Ultimately, everything you want to see happen in your ministry, when you go into your ministry, you depend on God to do, right? You need the Spirit of God. He gives the growth. And so if you aren't praying and asking God to do that in specific ways, then you're saying you don't really believe that in your ministry. So it starts with prayer. And then I think spending time with people. Just don't kind of let discipleship, one-on-one discipleship, other people do that.
Outsource it somehow.
Don't outsource that. So I'm discipling a guy right now, just gave his life to the Lord, and it's nothing energizes me more than that, right? And it impacts the stuff that seems obvious to me isn't obvious. And the more you're around lost people, the stuff that you think is obvious to them, it's not obvious. I feel like you need to acknowledge and continue to try to close the knowledge gap, because it's easy for us to get around, and we all understand what's happening, and we all see how things are connected. And it's been my experience that they don't see that, and the more time I spend with them, the better I am at helping them bridge that gap.
That's good.
I would add too, just the process of sermon prep for me, in terms of praying through who I'm preaching to myself first as I'm studying, and asking the questions: how would I think of this as a new believer, as a lost guy, or whatever, or as a long-term Christian? And making the applications early on before I'm stepping into, but first dealing with it in my own heart. That's where the convictions come, and the drive towards preaching to the right folks is really where it kind of lands heavy.
I'll just say one thing to that, because so obviously all of us would be proponents of expository preaching. There is sometimes this push of like you're going to have people that are far from God. You don't need to preach things that are heavy and even maybe heady. And I would say you can. So you put some things down low. You put some things up because you think, hey, I'm trying to move you along. And there would be times, even when I was first in seminary, there were things that would be said, and I'm like, I don't know that, but I want to know that. And so it would help. It would spur me to grow. And it's the same for young believers. And in fact, most of them, as I've met them, are usually very hungry, and they'll read whatever you put in front of them, and so they want to learn.
And I would say ultimately, everybody is living their lives based on a certain level, on beliefs, right? Whether they know them or not, whatever it is. And so I don't think you have to divide substantive and accessible.
Yeah.
You can say the exact same thing. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. So you don't use the just theological jargon,
right,
that's tied in, which is great, and there's a place for it. There's a people language, right, that's important for, but just don't use that language. It takes a little bit more energy to find pictures. Jesus is using illustrations appropriately for a reason. And if you're reading the Bible in that way and you're thinking of the hearts in that way, it's not what you say, it's how you say it.
That's good. All right, so we've got a number of folks out here watching us. We're doing this live stream from the Southern Baptist Convention. Okay, that's where this is happening right now, is the Southern Baptist Convention. And, Oklahoma Baptist University has a great relationship with the Baptist General Convention of Oklahoma. We're a cooperative program school. We believe in Baptist education. Look, OBU has been doing theological education and Christian liberal arts education for well over 100 years. We're passionate about Baptist cooperation, doing our thing so that we can see more things happen for Christ and for the church, right? That's what we want. But a lot of folks coming up, they might not know that story, and they might not know the value of Baptists cooperating. So let me ask you, okay, let's just take Hobbs College for Theology and Ministry at Oklahoma Baptist University, where we are. If we're talking about one of our ministry students coming up is going into a local church to be a pastor, serve on staff, and they're asking the question, why should we really be involved with the SBC? I mean, what does that even look like? I mean, what would you guys say to these folks? I know what we say, but I want to hear what you guys say.
Yeah, so I would say to this young man who's considering, why would I be SBC? I would give a couple answers. One, in the New Testament, there is a picture of cooperation. We don't need to do this alone. We need to do this together. You're going to have to find ways to cooperate if you're going to do church planting, if you're going to do theological education, if you're going to do international mission sending. The Southern Baptist Convention is not perfect. It has all kinds of flaws, but it is a very, very good mechanism by which we can cooperate together in order to do particularly those three things, as well as you add in disaster relief and other things. So it's not perfect, but it's really good. And so we actually started Baptist21 with this in mind. We had young brothers that were friends who were saying, I'm leaving, like, why would I want to deal with this? And we're saying, look, guys, we agree. It has some things that we would like to see changed, but instead of coming from the outside and throwing rocks back in, let's try to be a winsome voice from within that says, hey, there's a lot of great things here. Let's celebrate those. And then also let's be a voice and be at the table to try to see these other things change. And so I would just say to this young person, this is a massive organization that is planting thousands of churches a year, sending thousands of missionaries, training thousands of students in seminaries. Where else are you going to find that? Why not get involved, be a good steward of your money where you're sending it, and stay in? And then you get a chance to be a part of all that's going on in the world. I think this is a worthy place to do it, especially if you hold to the theology that we would say we think is best expressed in the New Testament, which is a Baptistic ecclesiology, which we see playing out in the Southern Baptist Convention.
Okay, that's fair. Jed, Ronnie, what about you guys? What would y'all say?
Listen, let's just, what are the alternatives? If you go off, and let's just say you want to do your own thing.
Right.
When you think about the call of Christ, the Great Commission, the task that's before us, the lostness that's out there, the darkness that we face, you're going to pretty quickly think, you know what, I need some help, right?
Yeah.
And maybe we should partner with this like-minded church over here, and maybe we could do a little bit more so that we can make a bigger impact, and let's get some others in. And then you're like, you know what, education's a pretty complex thing, and missions stuff is there's a lot of complexity that goes into all these things, and pretty soon you're going to come up with something like the Southern Baptist Convention.
Okay.
And so why waste all of that time trying to create something that, I hate to break it to us, as great as we all think we can be in our best moments, is going to be imperfect when we produce it? Why just hop into something where men and women have given their lives? They haven't been perfect, but they've served a perfect God who's advanced his perfect purposes through their imperfect efforts. Why not step into those institutions? Man, it takes a lot of work to build places like OBU and to steward those and steward those for the sake of the gospel to the ends of the earth.
Okay.
It's never going to be perfect, right? We don't have an over-realized eschatology, but man, there's an incredible things happening here, and you know what? I think we can do a lot more when good people hop in and show up for the things for the sake of the gospel.
So that's helpful. But you guys have mentioned the words imperfect. So Ronnie, I'm going to pitch you a softball question. This is I'm sure you'll find this incredibly easy to answer.
Sure.
Okay. So we've talked about the imperfect church, and one of the questions that our students at OBU are asking, particularly if they're in the College for Theology and Ministry, how do I go into the Southern Baptist Convention with all of the imperfections that we've been seeing recently on full blast? I mean, how do I, in good conscience, do that? Well, we are all staying in. What do we say to those folks who are saying, look, there's a lot that's imperfect in the SBC? What would you say?
Yeah, I think that's the case in all of our churches and even ourselves. We're all broken people, and God, through his grace, has forgiven us and decides to use broken people for his good. And this is what the church is made up of. We sit as pastors humbly called, knowing our own brokenness, and the opportunity to serve forward in that role, but also to help train up others who are just like us in terms of brokenness and launch them out. I think the convention is a place for broken people to serve a gracious God, and I think this is why it's worth diving into, because doctrinally we agree, missiologically we can do much more together, and it's awesome.
That's good. That's very helpful. So if we were to define maybe one of your great hopes for the SBC, for Baptist21, for your local church, are they all the same, or are your hopes for these different? Nate, why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I think our great hope, all of us, a common one, but then we would all maybe have smaller ones underneath it, is that obviously we want the glory of God seen most clearly in the making of disciples in all nations. And I think the best way we can do that is with a group of churches cooperating together to send thousands, and hopefully beyond that, hundreds of thousands, and even more. Like, not just what we're doing. And so I think my dream for the SBC is, one, we continue to have strong doctrine, which I think we have. We do deal with these things that have caused great harm to people, and also even shame on the gospel, that we deal with them in a way that's authentic, that's humble, that's repentant. Again, saying we are broken, and we'll freely admit that because Jesus has saved us from being broken.
But don't just paper it over.
No, let's really deal. This is really evil, and we really need to deal with it, and we need to be authentic and humble because we can be, because we have the gospel. And then let's move forward in such a way that says the gospel is what we need to propel forward. We need to have a common mission that we're about. We have common doctrine, so we can have common mission. And so that's my great hope, that we see continued mission. We see the strengthening of churches so that we see people saved in our communities, and we see the strengthening of churches so that we send missionaries overseas to see more churches planted. Because the truth is, when you plant a church, not just send a missionary, you have a chance to see disciples made, not just in that generation, but hopefully for generations to come.
Yep.
And so that would be our great hope for the Southern Baptist Convention. Baptist21 hopes to play a small part in propelling that forward, pushing conversation forward to see that happen. We do hope that the Lord will continue to bless and give favor to Baptist21 in that, but that's definitely what I want to see. I mean, I know we will have different pieces of that.
Sure.
Yeah.
What about you, Jed?
Yeah, I mean, it's, in a lot of ways on the Baptist21 level, one of the things we've talked about is we want to see there be a Baptist22, the next century, so to speak, to hand it off. That there's still a group of people who hold on to the gospel, that hold on to the Great Commission, and that are about seeing that advance through local churches to the ends of the earth. And so when it comes to what are dreams, what are visions, listen, there are still people groups right now around the world who are being born, raised, and dying apart with and never having one chance to hear the gospel. And we're engaged. We're not a big church, but we from the very beginning being engaged in those people groups. And one of them is 100% Muslim community, and they are great folks.
Wow.
They're island people.
Wow.
So they're just great folks. You know how hard it is to go from 0 to 1 in that culture. It's a miracle anywhere, and our churches are there.
Right.
But one of the conversations I heard about the other day was one of the Muslims said to a missionary that was there, of course, undercover, and he says, listen, even if I believed what you said was true, where would I go?
Wow.
The whole thing is built on Islam. How? Well, you know what? We've read the end of the story. We know Jesus is going to save people from that people group. We know that we're going to be celebrating King Jesus throughout eternity with them. There's a lot of work that has to happen between now and then in order for that to happen. And it's going to take a lot of trips and a lot of work and a lot of money and a lot of thinking, and people that aren't just called to ministry pastors, but people that are dentists who are over there using their skills to advance God's purposes, or people that are businessmen, which I believe is the future face of missions,
with that 100%.
and so many other things that and it's just going to take cooperation of imperfect people that are humbled by the fact that Jesus had to die for them, but are hopeful and encouraged because he was willing to die for them. But they understand that it's not just about them. It's about them too.
Ronnie, what about you? Your hope?
Yeah, I think there's just a great weight placed on us to carry the gospel forward to the next generation, being faithful in that task where we are locally, and then building up other brothers to do the same. It's kind of my own heartbeat for where we are across Charlotte. And as we seek to do that Baptist21 in terms of our influence from the blog and such, I just want to continue to see that happen. That's my prayer, and that's kind of the goal in my heartbeat as I think about the future.
When I think about the future, and as our representative from OBU, Oklahoma Baptist University, our great hope is to see our students' lives transformed by Christ so that they can go into different stratas of their communities and make an impact for God and for good in their world. That's our great hope. And the reason that gets me excited is because it helps us think about a university not existing for itself, but leveraging itself for the sake of Christ and his church. And that's our great hope. That's our great hope for OBU. Well, guys, thank you all so much for being part of this live stream event at Oklahoma Baptist University. Again, this is a partnership between Oklahoma Baptist University and Baptist21. And for those of you who are watching live right now, Don't forget the Baptist21 luncheon tomorrow. Is there anything you want to say about the Baptist21 luncheon?
It'll be streamed live on Baptist21.com.
We have a late addition to the panel.
Hey.
And we just got news. There's one of the topics we're going to be discussing there is the sexual abuse situation that we're facing here. Information. Well, there was an article today in the New York Times that addressed the Village Church, and Matt Chandler.
Oh my goodness.
Is going to be flying
Okay,
up here.
good.
He's cutting his sabbatical short to fly up here to talk about it at the panel tomorrow. So,
well, that's a huge addition. Thank you for that. Well, thank you all for being a part today, and we look forward to seeing you. We have another event. The Herschel H. Hobbs Award will be coming up in the next 30 minutes, and we'll be giving that award. You will want to be a part of that. And then tomorrow, we have 2 panel events with the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission here at our booth at 9 a.m. and at 9:30. We're going to be talking about 2 topics. The first is human dignity. The second is how we disagree well with one another. And that's a very difficult thing to do. So Dr. Moore and the rest of the ERLC staff is going to be with us, as well as Dr. Matthew Emerson, who is our theology professor at OBU. He's going to be on the panel as well. So you guys are not going to want to miss it. Gentlemen, thank you all very much. And let's give our guests a hand of thanks. All right. Thank you.